Tonight on 24, the fate of the Islamic Republic is the topic of a special meeting at the White House. The U.S. Secretary of State says the end times hardliners in Tehran are preventing a deal from being reached. Political disagreements are escalating in Iran, with Jalali's close associates refusing to sign a statement supporting the negotiating team. 261 members of parliament say the enemy is looking to create division among the system's officials. And the revocation of citizenship for 69 people in Bahrain on charges of supporting Iranian attacks. Manama says they and their families must leave the country.
From Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good evening. As the ceasefire between Tehran and Washington continues, the U.S. President in the White House Situation Room with the National Security and Foreign Policy team is making decisions about the negotiation deadlock and the options ahead. According to 3 U.S. officials speaking to Axios website, the focus of the meeting is to review the stalled talks. Meanwhile, reports indicate the Islamic Republic proposed through mediators that in the first step, the naval blockade be stopped by opening the Strait of Hormuz, followed by nuclear negotiations. Also, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said an hour ago that ultimate power in Iran rests with end times hardliners, who remain the main obstacle to a deal. My colleague Samira Garai has joined us from the White House itself. Samira, after an eventful weekend, now Mr. Trump is starting the week itself with a very busy day. On one hand, a British king is coming to the US. On the other hand, he's gone to the Situation Room to review the situation in Iran.
And much sooner than we originally expected, he convened the crisis room meeting with key members of the Supreme National Security Council. We initially anticipated a gathering at either 1:30 our time, about an hour ago, or later at 5:30. However, taking everyone by surprise, at exactly 1 o'clock, Ms. Lovett arrived and held an impromptu press conference, which had not been publicly announced beforehand. We honestly didn't expect Ms. Lovett to take the podium at all this week, given her ongoing maternity situation. Yet she stepped up and formally announced that the urgent meeting had already begun and that discussions are still ongoing right now. She said, "I was already getting myself ready for this conference, and I don't know if they've finished the meeting or not. And in that meeting, they reviewed the Islamic Republic's proposal." Which proposal? The one that we heard about on Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, we know that Mr. Trump canceled the trip of his envoys, Messrs. Wyckoff and Kushner. He said, why should they fly for 18 hours and go there? If there's going to be a development, if there's going to be progress, the Islamic Republic has our phone number. They can call us. These very issues can be resolved over the phone. On Sunday, news came that the Islamic Republic had proposed 3 phases. Phase 1, the United States comes and gives this guarantee that it will no longer continue the attacks. They should completely end the ongoing war. Once that step is implemented, they will proceed to Phase 2, which is the detailed discussion about the Strait of Hormuz. Finally, in Phase 3, they address the broader nuclear issue. They brought this comprehensive proposal here earlier this morning and thoroughly reviewed it in the Supreme National Security Council meeting. Let's go and listen to parts where Ms. Lovett talks about this important meeting for Fardad.
The proposed
Iran's proposal for reopening the Strait of Hormuz was brought up in today's meeting between the president and the national security team. I don't want to speak ahead of the president or his team. I just want to reiterate that the president's red lines regarding Iran are completely clear, both for the American people and for Iran itself.
Ms. Lovett says that President Trump is going to speak very soon regarding the Islamic Republic's recent proposals and carefully outline what the administration thinks about them. Furthermore, it is expected that in about 2 more hours, at the absolute most, the King of Great Britain will formally arrive here. Notably, this is the very first official visit he is making at a time when Mr. Trump has just begun his 2nd term as president. With his highly anticipated arrival, when they finally sit down together here inside the West Wing, we fully expect Mr. Trump, alongside King Charles, to extensively discuss this crucial diplomatic proposal right there in front of reporters. As Ms. Levitt is pointing out right now, we cannot really determine what Mr. Trump thinks about the Islamic Republic's proposals. However, Foreign Minister Ruby, who is also part of this Supreme National Security Council team, spoke with Fox TV today, Fardad. He specifically stated that it is completely unacceptable to us for the Islamic Republic to attempt to take control of the Strait of Hormuz and to normalize this, meaning the normalization of the strategic strait being lying in the hands of the Islamic Republic right now, or that it will continually have a role. The Islamic Republic's relentless efforts for this normalization. None of these are acceptable to the United States. Mr. Ruby said in another part that they are indeed serious in the current ongoing negotiations, and the diplomatic proposals they've given seem to be quite serious. Those proposals I mentioned, we know about them only through the media. These aren't official things just yet. Informed sources simply said that the Islamic Republic has formally proposed them. Now, Mr. Ruby says that what we have recently received clearly shows the seriousness of the Islamic Republic. The most important obstacle Mr. Ruby currently sees on the path to reaching a final agreement is this persistent issue of hardliners inside Iran. Mr. Ruby emphasizes that all of them are ultimately hardliners. This whole political game of moderates, hardliners, and principalists isn't relevant for the U.S. government. They are all hardliners at their core. But some, like Arakshi, Ghalibaf, and Pezeshkian, understand that the country desperately needs a functioning economy. They realize they need to pay salaries so people make ends meet, and from this pragmatic perspective, they engage with America. Another group who are affiliated with the IRGC, like people such as Vahidi, they don't realize they're all hardliners, they all think apocalyptically, they're all extremists, but those ones understand economic issues. The last point I'd add is about the second round of Islamabad negotiations. Islamabad seems unlikely because, based on the videos that have been released, the entire area they had set up for security for the second round of negotiations. They had put up fences, they had put up iron railings. The Pakistani government has collected all of them, meaning that area, Fardad, doesn't have the readiness to hold the second round of negotiations at all anymore.
Thank you, Samira Garai, my excellent colleague, reporting directly from inside the White House. During Samira's remarks, you are also seeing live images of King Charles's plane, which just moments ago safely landed at Andrews Air Force Base in suburban Washington, D.C., over in Maryland. Of course, the broadcast graphic says Dulles Airport there, which is another facility located near that same Washington, D.C. area. It is currently planned that the British King will officially visit the United States on a busy 4-day trip to strengthen diplomatic ties. This trip is happening at a very sensitive time because you're certainly aware that just this past weekend, during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, an assassination attempt was made on the life of the US president and his accompanying delegation, which also raised concerns in London. And apparently there were many discussions over the weekend between Washington and London about the security situation in the US Capitol, regarding whether the British King should proceed with this trip as previously planned or not. As you can see, his Airbus plane landed moments ago in suburban Washington, D.C. Media in Iran say that the team close to Saeed Jalili and the Steadfastness Front did not sign the statement of support from 261 members of parliament for the negotiating team led by Mohammad Bakir Ghalibaf. These representatives, in their statement, supported the negotiating team, especially Ghalibaf, and said that in this new era of war, the enemy is seeking to create a rift between the system's officials and the people. Miriam Memar Sadeghi, political activist from Maryland, and Jamshi Barzagar, journalist and political analyst from Toronto, are with us. Ms. Memar Sadeghi, in your opinion, are these potential rifts significant enough to be able to create a meaningful change or a meaningful crisis within the system?
Hello and warm greetings to you. These political rifts, just as Mr. Ruby and Trump seem to understand quite well, are completely superficial. They are not meaningful rifts, and they are not significant, because it is mostly just a carefully constructed facade that the Islamic Republic has deliberately maintained for years and years. Through that calculated facade, the regime attempts to systematically deceive both the people of Iran and the broader international community. They want to project a false narrative that says, we are a moderate group here that is easier to get along with, and we are earnestly seeking fair change for the world. And now, facing immense global pressure, the Islamic Republic has absolutely no choice but to put these fabricated divisions in front of the United States, desperately attempting to, in essence, deceive the watching world. But I honestly don't think the current negotiations will get anywhere by proceeding this way. Just as Ms. Garai was saying right now, exactly what America insists must happen before anything else can be addressed is finally solving the nuclear issue, meaning that the enriched uranium that is still stuck there, the Islamic Republic simply wants to promise to resolve it later, after everything else is finalized. Their strategy means waiting until the war completely ends and they secure their other strategic objectives. Only then, for example, would the Islamic Republic come forward and give this uranium to America. Well, it is clear that this is a diplomatic trick, and America rightly recognizes this tactic, wanting to get its hands on the uranium first before giving concessions to the Islamic Republic.
Mr. Barzagar, contrary to reports from numerous international media outlets about internal rifts, they themselves seem to be trying to project a sense of unity to the outside world as much as possible. Do you think this reflection also shows the reality on the ground, or is the situation much worse than what they're showing on the surface?
خیلی خرابتر از اون چیزی است که در ظاهر نشون میدن.
Greetings to you, Miss Maymar Siddiqui, and to all of your viewers tuning in today. Look, if we analyze the current situation, the Islamic Republic, or more accurately, the diverse and complex team that currently holds the leadership of the Islamic Republic, ranging from figures like Bakr Ghalibaf to Pezeshkian to Ahmed Baidi, Zolgadr, and Mohsen Rezai, is actually engaged in a relentless war on several different fronts simultaneously. One of the most critical battlegrounds is on the front involving America and Israel. In this geopolitical arena, the absolute most important issue remains their uranium enrichment program. Specifically, the accumulation of highly enriched uranium is a major point of contention, which America absolutely insists must be definitively resolved before any future diplomatic action or any comprehensive agreement can be reached. Of course, there are other issues too, like missile and drone programs, as well as support for proxy forces. The second front is within the government itself, where different factions, or more accurately, different power gangs, due to conflicting interests, less ideologically and more in terms of benefits, and in the vacuum created after the death of Ali Khamenei.
خلای ایجاد شده در پس از مرگ علی
And first and second tier leaders like Hossein Salami, like Mohammed Papour, like Ali Larijani, Ali Shamhani are actually filling that political vacuum, and at the same time, there are their loyal supporters. These are undeniably serious internal disagreements, despite the fact that, for example, you see Saeed Jalili also posted the exact same tweet that Mohammed Bakr Ghalibaf posted, Mohseni Ajahi posted, Pezeshkian posted about us being united and having national cohesion, but you see in the official statement that representatives sign in the Islamic Consultative Assembly, Saeed Jalili's supporters simply do not sign that statement in defense of or support for
دفاع از یا حمایت
Ghalibaf, primarily because fundamentally that statement serves as a direct kind of attack on those very hardline supporters who, according to them, launched an intense psychological and media war against Ghalibaf. Furthermore, looking at the broader spectrum of Islamic Republic supporters, securing their acceptance of any political surrender and effectively convincing them of this necessary matter remains a significant hurdle. This internal ideological rigidity is inherently one of the major problems that, in fact, actively hinders the Islamic Republic's flexibility in these complex international negotiations. And finally, the deeply entrenched third front is the Islamic Republic's perpetual and continuous confrontation with the Iranian people. As we read in the deeply concerning exclusive reports recently broadcast by Iran International, a critical meeting was held at the Supreme National Security Council, chaired by Zolgadr. During this session, an urgent warning was issued regarding the imminent threat of a massive new wave of civil protests. This unrest is largely due to skyrocketing unemployment, a devastating halt in domestic production, and uncontrollable inflation. Furthermore, citizens face remarkably difficult living conditions that ongoing regional war, a severe economic and naval blockade, alongside crippling international sanctions, have heavily exacerbated. Therefore, this overwhelming combination of profound domestic crises and a simultaneous war on several complex fronts has caused vital government decisions to be constantly and indefinitely postponed. And the Islamic Republic, at the same time, tries to turn this weakness of its own, meaning its inability to make decisions and internal rifts, into a strength in negotiations. What does that mean? It means buying time. Maybe something good will happen in the meantime. For example, something happens in the world, and America's focus on Iran disappears, and the Islamic Republic can catch its breath, while the naval blockade is gradually revealing its results, and the Islamic Republic wants to end this situation sooner.
If you allow me, I'll play a statement by a Mehdi Mohammadi, strategic advisor to the parliament speaker, who said that if the naval blockade isn't lifted through negotiations, the Islamic Republic will soon start a war.
Look, in my opinion, the Americans must decide within the next crucial days about entering a new military campaign regarding Iran. If this does not happen, and if this tense situation simply continues without being resolved politically, we will be left with no alternative. We will be forced to break the suppressive blockade militarily, and make no mistake, we will decisively do it. Just today, if you have seen the latest official statement from the Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, it explicitly warns that there is very little time remaining. Furthermore, it firmly stresses that if the Americans once again attempt what they aggressively did this morning to prevent one of Iran's bulk carriers from safely entering sovereign Iranian ports, then we will assume that available diplomatic and political options are no longer useful and alternative military action must be taken. In other words, the precise interpretation of the standoff is that if necessary, my professional assessment is that in the coming days, or maybe even in the next week or two, Iran must initiate a war to decisively break the severe naval blockade. Obviously, the grave decision to start a war is an incredibly complex one. It is certainly not an easy decision with such high stakes, but unfortunately, there is simply no other way.
Ms. Mimar Siddiqui, there's no doubt that both sides have their finger on the trigger, but in recent conflicts, it has never been the Islamic Republic that started it. This time, when the situation is currently up in the air, and with this blockade, Tehran is also in a very difficult situation. Do you find his words plausible that actually Tehran might pull the trigger before America?
Look, Mr. Farzad, in my opinion, it doesn't make much difference if war starts again, and what's more important than anything, whether it's started by the US or the Islamic Republic, the main thing here is whether the US, the Trump administration, is actually ready to fight in a way that totally changes Iran. I mean, for the Islamic Republic to be defeated and for there to be a transition to another government, which, well, we all hope would be a democratic and free one. From what I see, and a lot of analysts, both left and right in America, are saying, Trump unfortunately isn't ready for such a fundamental change in Iran. And, you know, during that 12-day war when they hit Fordo with Israel, ultimately, it was Donald Trump who stepped in and stopped Prime Minister Netanyahu, firmly saying, no, don't go any further. At the time, it really seemed like Israel was aggressively pushing for a broader regime change policy, and Trump just wasn't ready to support that level of escalation. Trump is a president who has built and maintained his core voters and his broader political popularity on the central idea that America simply shouldn't fight endless wars in the Middle East anymore at all. Right now, he's also under political pressure domestically in the US because, you know, oil prices have gone up. And maybe even more importantly, his supporters, his base, the ones who really love him, they're just not happy about another war in the Middle East, especially not a war where afterwards America would have to get involved and take responsibility for a new government. So it seems like America isn't convinced that the Iranian people, Trump isn't convinced that the Iranian people, the Iranian opposition, are ready to completely move on from the Islamic Republic. This is the biggest deadlock US policy is facing when it comes to the Islamic Republic. If America felt confident that we could just set aside this entire Islamic Republic government, every type of it, you know, the so-called hardliners, reformists, everyone, there would be a regime change, and after that we would completely transition from the Islamic Republic to a brand new government. If Trump actually had that kind of clear assurance, well, his policy against the Islamic Republic would have been much stronger. Right now, just like they strategically killed all those important figures from the Islamic Republic, he wouldn't let officials like Arachi and Kalibaf and those guys stay alive. The Islamic Republic clearly senses that Trump isn't willing to go all the way to see it through to the end. And that hesitation is unfortunately America's biggest weakness right now.
Mr. Barzagar, how likely do you find this Axios report? Even now, there's a significant economic and energy crisis. Mr. Trump is under pressure both domestically and from his allies in the Persian Gulf region, particularly countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, which are practically unable to conduct any imports or exports due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The midterm election campaigns are also slowly beginning. There are only a few months remaining, and pressures are high. Do you consider it likely that Mr. Trump would agree to, all right, let's temporarily reopen the Strait of Hormuz with a provisional agreement and postpone the nuclear issue for later?
It is truly difficult to accurately predict what decisions Donald Trump will make and what specific actions he will take. Even within the political landscape of the US, it is genuinely difficult to anticipate what he will do, especially considering the contradictory statements he has frequently made on these complex matters. However, if we carefully consider the consistent underlying path he has historically followed, my perception is that I somewhat agree with Ms. Maymar Sadeghi's points, but I believe other crucial aspects should also be taken into account to form a complete picture. But I do think other significant aspects should also be carefully considered. I believe that Donald Trump himself is quite aware of the complex situation he finds himself in today. If the Islamic Republic remains in its current form and can in fact claim a strategic victory, this will undoubtedly be perceived as a major diplomatic defeat for Trump in the West. This applies both to European allies who have been highly critical of his foreign policy performance and within the US itself, given the approach of the mainstream media. Such a narrative would truly make the remainder of his presidency incredibly challenging for him, particularly when confronting major global rivals like China or dealing with other powerful nations. Conversely, achieving a decisive victory in confronting the Islamic Republic could significantly enhance his political standing. This represents a monumental feat that his 7 presidential predecessors over the past 50 years were unable to accomplish, despite their varied efforts. Succeeding where others failed could potentially earn him a revered status akin to Ronald Reagan's, at least among Republicans. Furthermore, my firm understanding is that Trump will never abandon the foundational strategies he outlined in that initial executive order. He introduced this crucial directive just 2 or 3 weeks after first entering the White House to officially resume the maximum pressure policy. If you recall, he explicitly presented 3 major guiding principles there, and those very same 3 core tenets are still firmly on the table right now. Specifically, the primary demands require achieving absolute zero uranium enrichment, completely dismantling the enrichment facilities, and neutralizing the nuclear program in its current form. Furthermore, there must be a strict framework to restrict the ballistic missile program, alongside ceasing all support for regional proxy groups. These critical points remain firmly on the table, and I believe the continuation of the severe economic blockade has, in fact, demonstrated Trump's unwavering determination to pursue this exact course of action. The Islamic Republic is, in essence, locked in a tense standoff where both sides are testing the other's patience and resolve. Yet, it is entirely clear that in this particular area, much like in other strategic matters, the Islamic Republic's overall resilience and capacity for endurance will be significantly lower. Regarding whether what Kolibov's advisor mentioned will materialize, that is, whether they will actually resort to military action and initiate it, I believe that the Islamic Republic will, at the very least, refrain from such an action until the last possible moment. Despite all the existing pressures, as you, Ms. Maymar Sadeghi, aptly referred to the ongoing global energy crisis, rising oil prices, and the political opposition present within the US and among other allies, which has practically deterred them from formally joining forces, let us not forget a crucial geopolitical reality. The Arab littoral states of the Persian Gulf, despite the multifaceted economic and security challenges they currently face, inherently understand that a continued survival of the Islamic Republic in its current form poses a far greater existential danger to regional stability. The relentless diplomatic pressure they are applying is explicitly intended to ensure that a looming threat of the Islamic Republic is finally addressed seriously and effectively. So my firm impression is that Mr. Trump won't back down much, even though his primary goal might not necessarily be regime change in the Islamic Republic. He definitely wants an Islamic Republic that has entirely surrendered to America and to him personally, fully accepting his strict conditions. I truly do not think he will back down from these demanding conditions or from the Islamic Republic's complete surrender, despite the various limitations, significant diplomatic obstacles, and intense political pressures he currently faces throughout the West.
As Mr. Trump himself says, we'll see what happens. Thank you to both of you. Maryam Maymar Sadeghi, political activist from Maryland, and Jamshid Barzagar, journalist and political analyst from Toronto. Coinciding with the UN Security Council meeting on waterway safety, a statement against the Islamic Republic was issued. Proposed by Bahrain and supported by over 80 countries, it addressed the Strait of Hormuz. Bahrain's foreign minister warned at the meeting that Tehran's behavior in the strait threatens the global economy, and the international community's silence might lead to the continuation of this trend.
The security of maritime corridors is aligned with everyone's interests, therefore shouldn't be dealt with selectively. Therefore, the Kingdom of Bahrain requests the international community to acknowledge the serious consequences of the Strait of Hormuz being blocked by Iran. This blockage is a violation of international law, and its goal is to create difficulty and hardship for other countries.
My colleague Mariam Rahmati joins us from UN headquarters in New York. Mariam, Bahrain recently led diplomatic protests against the Islamic Republic. How far have their efforts gotten, and how much international support do they have?
Well, Bahrain stands out as one of those Arab countries currently serving as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. In this unique position, it is currently doing something that other Persian Gulf and regional countries cannot do, at least within the Security Council. And really, over the course of the past 2 months, Bahrain has been extremely active and highly influential. This is especially true for those critical resolutions it formally brought to the Council regarding maritime security in the vital Strait of Hormuz. Of those important resolutions, one specifically focused on unequivocally condemning the Islamic Republic's destabilizing behavior and also the direct attacks the Islamic Republic was carrying out against neighboring Persian Gulf countries. Through diplomatic persistence, that resolution was successfully passed. But the second resolution, we know, was vetoed by China and Russia. And now that Bahrain is the president of the Security Council this month, it had held this meeting today, which was a high-level meeting attended by foreign ministers of various countries and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres himself. The crucial meeting held today regarding the strategic Strait of Hormuz was mostly focused on the severe global consequences of disruption in this vital waterway and the absolute necessity for its immediate reopening to global trade. For example, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres attended this important session and warned in his opening speech that the world's waterways have currently turned into a highly volatile stage for international testing. In his remarks, he especially refers indirectly to the deep geopolitical paralysis among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council: China, France, Russia, Britain, and America. He highlights how they cannot reach a unified agreement or forge a necessary consensus to pass a resolution that would allow them to take practical, decisive action regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Specifically, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sternly warns that global energy security, international supply chains, and even worldwide food security are currently threatened due to the perilous closure of the Strait of Hormuz. He emphasizes that ensuring safe, secure, and unimpeded passage through this crucial maritime choke point is an absolute economic and humanitarian necessity to prevent widespread market collapse and protect vulnerable populations from facing unprecedented hardship. Most of the prominent delegates who spoke at this crucial meeting, including Bahrain's foreign minister, strongly emphasized that this escalating crisis is no longer limited to the Middle East region. With a dramatic increase in commercial shipping and maritime insurance costs, very serious economic shocks have been inflicted on global energy and international trade markets. For this pressing reason, they urgently want this paralyzing deadlock in the United Nations Security Council to be resolved as soon as possible, for greater international coordination to take place, and for the vital Strait of Hormuz to be reopened as soon as possible. It is vital that allied countries stand up firmly against the Islamic Republic so that it cannot completely disrupt or even threaten to create disruption in such an increasingly important global waterway. The Strait of Hormuz remains critical to international trade and global energy security. At this recent Security Council meeting, one of the speeches that immediately drew widespread attention was from the representative of the United States of America. He explicitly pointed out at this session that the Islamic Republic routinely uses the Strait of Hormuz as geopolitical leverage against the world. Furthermore, he emphasized that Washington will not allow such aggressive actions to continue and will absolutely not accept this destabilizing behavior from the Islamic Republic. Let's listen together to part of the American representative's remarks at the Security Council meeting.
I want to deeply focus on this critical discussion regarding the perilous practice of sea mining. This inherently indiscriminate act, where you carelessly lay explosive mines in heavily trafficked international waterways, unequivocally turns Iran into an international criminal state. These rogue actors are essentially acting as modern pirates of the Strait, threatening innocent lives and global trade. Shockingly, Tehran has openly confessed and acknowledged committing these egregious crimes. Yet, on the other hand, the regime is so profoundly incompetent that it blatantly claims it doesn't even know where these submerged mines are actually located. Fortunately, the highly capable U.S. military has swiftly taken decisive action to actively clear, sweep, and safely remove these dangerous threats. Now, it is absolutely imperative for a robust coalition of like-minded countries and partners to step forward and help.
Fardad, at the exact same time that many countries are expressing deep anger and frustration with a paralyzing situation in the Security Council, many of the international representatives we speak with are growing increasingly worried. Global energy prices have sharply increased, directly impacting consumers. Consequently, their countries' domestic economic situations are simply not good, facing mounting inflationary pressures. Furthermore, hundreds of crucial cargo ships and oil tankers are currently stuck in the vital Strait of Hormuz. They are desperately waiting for a clear, practical agenda from the broader international community, and specifically from the UN, regarding the Strait of Hormuz, as they clearly see that neither prolonged diplomatic negotiations lead anywhere, nor do stern warnings, nor does the threat of war. They want, in fact, for immediate and practical action to be taken. In stark contrast, representatives from both Russia and China actually attribute the primary responsibility for the highly volatile current situation in the Strait of Hormuz directly to the US. They forcefully argue that it was the US and Israel who, according to their official perspective, started an illegal war against Iran, and that is precisely why the situation in the vital Strait of Hormuz is what we clearly see today. Now, simultaneously with these geopolitical tensions, we are also witnessing a significant wave of coordinated diplomatic pressure. We see that over 80 nations now actively support Bahrain's official statement strongly condemning the Islamic Republic, and they intend to continuously maintain these diplomatic pressures across the international community in the coming days and weeks. Fardad.
Thank you very much, Mariam Rahbati from United Nations headquarters in New York. The deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, in an exclusive interview with Iran International, said that the Canadian government's stance on the Islamic Republic differs from what happens behind closed doors. Melissa Lantzman told our reporter Masa Mortazavi that Iranians in Canada have made it impossible for the Canadian government to ignore them, with gatherings of hundreds of thousands.
Canada has not had a unified stance on Iran. When the cameras are on, you hear strong words. But when you are seemingly behind closed doors at the United Nations, absolute silence prevails. This silence is in the face of someone we have listed as a state sponsor of terrorism. This silence is in the face of millions of men, women, and children fighting for freedom in Iran. When you remain silent at the United Nations and allow Iran to take on leadership roles in women's rights and counterterrorism, you have in fact voted for them, and the government should not tell the Canadian people anything otherwise. This is worse than ignorance. This is a tacit endorsement and a secret green light in step with a world that has turned its back on the people of Iran. You cannot negotiate for peace without having a partner for peace. You must isolate Iran in every forum in the world that matters, and especially at the United Nations. They absolutely should not hold any responsibilities or international platforms in the critical areas of women's rights or counterterrorism. Without a doubt, they remain the most destabilizing force in the region and rank among the most destructive forces in the entire world. Canada must urgently recognize this grim reality and raise its voice loudly. We must advocate not only for the brave people of Iran, but also for the vulnerable people right here in Canada who fled that brutal regime and are now being targeted by those same operatives on our own soil. Look, I think we, as the official opposition, will fiercely use every possible opportunity to bring this pressing issue up. Because if you truly believe in the fundamental principles of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law in Canada, you should firmly believe in those rights everywhere else too, and actively use your voice. We will also heavily rely on the passionate Iranian community here. Those who were absolutely incredible in making their voices heard, came to the streets, and with powerful marches of hundreds of thousands, made it completely impossible for the government to ignore this urgent situation. They bravely didn't let the government have it both ways. I mean, that is exactly what they are doing right now, and everyone around the world has noticed it. Keep going strong on your vital path. We will continue to stand by you. We pray for you, and we know that one day we will have a free Iran, just as it was once known as one of the greatest civilizations on Earth. In one of the greatest civilizations on Earth.
You were listening to the remarks of Melissa Lantsman, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, in an interview with our reporter Massa Mortazavi. The French president said an hour ago that he will soon speak with Islamic Republic officials about the necessity of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Emmanuel Macron also said that the international community has formed a coalition to demonstrate the importance of this waterway opening sooner. Meanwhile, the German chancellor said that the war situation between the US and the Islamic Republic has become very complicated and has had significant costs for Europe. Faresh, referring to the course of talks between Tehran and Washington, says that the Islamic Republic, especially IRGC officials, have humiliated the US with these types of negotiations. My colleague Ali Hassanpour from Berlin is with us. Ali, it's clear what mechanism, what solution, what diplomacy the Europeans want to employ to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, Fardad, what can clearly be seen in the recent stances of various European countries is a series of political, diplomatic, and economic moves that are simultaneously shaping up across the continent. This shift strongly illustrates that this crisis is no longer considered merely a contained regional conflict, but a broader global concern. Well, on a strictly political level, the German chancellor frankly criticized the United States' overarching management of this ongoing war. He explicitly stated that it is currently entirely unclear what viable exit strategy America is actually pursuing. Furthermore, he emphasized with deep concern that the United States seemingly entered this complex war without any clear long-term strategy in place. Merz, also referring to the negotiation process, said that the Iranians negotiate very skillfully, or even very skillfully avoid negotiations. And in this very framework, he also warned that, well, the entire American nation is currently being humiliated by the leadership of the Islamic Republic, especially, in fact, by the Revolutionary Guard. Merz, at the same time, however, emphasized that this ongoing war has direct impacts on Germany's broader economic performance and is undeniably costing everyday taxpayers money, and in fact draining the country's vital economic capacity. And he also, for example, referred directly to the escalating situation in the Strait of Hormuz and said that he, in fact, referred to the dangerous possibility of sea mining. He emphasized that Europe, especially Germany, has offered to send German minesweeping ships to the region to reopen this crucial route. Of course, strictly on the condition that, the conflict stop. But, alongside Merz's strong stances today, we see diplomatic movements are also underway. For example, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool traveled to New York following the consequences of this war to speak at the UN Security Council meeting regarding maritime security and the status of vital shipping lanes. Finally, let me say that similar stances are also seen at the European Union level. For example, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has announced that lifting sanctions against the Islamic Republic at a current time is premature, and emphasizes that these sanctions were imposed due to the Iranian government's behavior and must remain in place.
Thank you, my Berlin colleague Ali Hassanpour, for joining. Bahrain's Interior Ministry has announced that it has revoked the citizenship of 69 individuals for supporting the recent attacks by the Islamic Republic. The statement said these individuals lost their citizenship on charges of supporting attacks carried out by the Islamic Republic against regional targets. The statement added that these 69 individuals, which include the accused and their family members, all have non-Bahraini origins. Ali Sadzadeh, a Middle East analyst from Frankfurt, has joined us. Mr. Sadzadeh, among these Persian Gulf countries, Bahrain perhaps has more complexities because it has a significant Shia population, and some of them, also have sympathies with the Islamic Republic.
That is absolutely right. And he explicitly states that a number of these individuals received financial backing directly from the Islamic Republic. Furthermore, some of them were stationed abroad, where they underwent specialized training provided by the Revolutionary Guard. Additionally, some of these operatives are people who covertly gathered and provided sensitive information to the Islamic Republic. Moreover, some of them are also people who, much like those we recently saw in the Emirates, or the ongoing issue currently being discussed inside Iran, secretly sent images and footage to foreign media channels. The comprehensive total of these implicated individuals is 69 people, meaning this figure counts the primary suspects along with their associated family members in total. Their full names are also being prominently published in local newspapers. In these reports, the media deliberately uses the word ajam to heavily emphasize that these individuals do not possess authentic Bahraini origins. Apparently, these individuals come from families whose ancestors, their fathers or grandfathers, most likely migrated to the country from Iran. While the exact historical timeline cannot be stated precisely, this exclusionary narrative defines the underlying tone of reporting in the press. Furthermore, this severe action, meaning the targeted revocation of citizenship or the removal of fundamental citizenship rights, is not a completely new phenomenon in the region. The government had already done this previously, stripping the nationality of a group of 20 people who they firmly believed were actively in direct contact with Hezbollah in Lebanon. In Kuwait last year, approximately 5,000 people had their citizenship officially revoked, an alarming administrative process that is increasingly being utilized across many of the Persian Gulf countries to penalize dissent or manage demographics. It is important to note that while some of these targeted individuals had previously been arrested or were already serving time in prison, a significant portion of them had never been arrested or formally charged with any crime at all. The sudden revocation of citizenship carries devastating, lifelong consequences for those affected. It essentially means that these newly stateless people are entirely deprived of all fundamental social and government services. Consequently, they lose access to public health care, legal employment opportunities, and state housing. Furthermore, their children likely cannot even enroll in local schools, forcing families to navigate daily life entirely without any form. Secondly, it's possible they might even deport them from the country.
Mr. Sedzada, it's not just Bahrain, it's also Kuwait. As you also mentioned, some other countries have taken similar actions. It seems that many of these countries, especially in the Persian Gulf region, see citizenship not as a right, but as a privilege. It's not just about citizenship either. I know that, well, they were under very heavy pressure from the Islamic Republic, but there have also been cases from the arrest of journalists to those who just took photos of damaged buildings, which has raised many concerns about the human rights situation in these countries as well.
That is absolutely right. That is exactly why a prominent human rights organization based in Denmark, which is notably run by a dedicated woman of Iranian origin, has recently spoken out. They stated that these aggressive actions are solely being carried out by the ruling Al Khalifa family as a calculated strategy to increase and solidify their dominance over Bahrain. Furthermore, a highly respected association of international lawyers based in London has strongly protested these measures, openly condemning them as completely inhumane. Some of these legal experts argued, exactly as you've mentioned, that citizenship is a fundamental human right, not merely a conditional privilege arbitrarily granted by the state. Therefore, a person's nationality should not be revoked so easily. However, despite this widespread international condemnation, there is apparently a controversial clause embedded within Bahrain's constitution that has already foreseen this issue, allowing the government to exploit a legal loophole. But as you previously noted, in many affluent Persian Gulf countries, the reality is quite different because the overall economic situation and standard of living there are significantly better compared to other surrounding nations. These governments tend to treat the granting of citizenship strictly as an exclusive privilege rather than a fundamental right. Consequently, they maintain the authority to take it back at practically any time. And for this exact purpose, as I mentioned earlier, they have carefully established strict legal provisions beforehand. However, international human rights activists and civil rights advocates strongly argue against this practice. They firmly maintain that a person's citizenship should never be weaponized or used as a political tool that can be easily stripped away. To illustrate a standard, they point to Europe. In European democracies, once you obtain citizenship, the state cannot take it back easily due to comprehensive legal protections. When you officially become a citizen, for example, in my case, or in your case, whether you become a German, an English, or a French citizen, you instantly gain all the exact same rights that a native-born French or German person naturally possesses. You are completely equal under the law. And just as the German government cannot arbitrarily revoke the citizenship of any native German, it cannot do it to me either, unless I do something exceptionally strange or seriously unlawful. And even then, the state would have to navigate a rigorous legal process. The government would have to formally go to court and file a legal complaint against me to even attempt such a drastic action. But practically speaking, taking my citizenship away is simply not possible for them.
Thank you, Ali Sedzadeh, Middle East analyst from Frankfurt, for joining us. Before we say goodbye, we have a short moment to go to Washington. The U.S. Department of Justice is about to start a press conference in a few moments, which has actually just started. As you can see, Chris Wray, the FBI director, and the Attorney General are also behind him. Officials are going to provide more details regarding the tragic shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but unfortunately our broadcasting time here comes to an end. Thank you so much for watching tonight's 24 program. If you missed anything, you can watch the entire episode again on our official YouTube channel a bit later.